The simplicity of this quilt makes the wording front and center to give honor to the veteran who receives it.
What's in the box? Well, this is the next class that I was asked to teach. It was a quilt that I had done a couple years ago, and backed by popular demand, it's going to be the next quilt I make. So let's open the box. And this is the quilt that I'm talking about. It was a quilt that I made for wounded warriors, and along the bottom here is a set-in piece that says, "America, home of the brave." So, without further ado, let's get on with the lesson. So in my little box of tricks here, I have my fabric for this. I have
2 yards
of designer solids from Missouri Star Quilt Company in an ecru, or actually it's called cream color. I have 1 yard, again of Supreme Solids. It's the Noel Red. I have 2 yards of this fabric, which will be used as the backing, and it is from Backside Fabrics, and it's 108 inches wide. And last but not least, the star of the show is the Stonehenge Stars and Stripes 4 strip set. Now I'm going to unroll this so that you can see it, but the first thing I always like to do prior to unrolling a jelly roll or a strip set is to take a lint brush and brush it over the top of the jelly roll. Now I don't know if you can see my hand, but it's pretty much covered. As is my brush with lint. So we'll keep going. Now if I didn't do this, all this lint would probably end up down in the bobbin area of my sewing machine. So this is what I've gotten so far. And let's turn it over and get the other side. It's amazing how much lint comes off of these things, particularly since they have pinked edges, which is supposed to keep it from fraying, and it does, but it doesn't keep it from having little pieces of lint all over it. So you can see there's a good bit of lint coming off of this still. So I'm going to brush this lint away. And now when I unroll it, I'll have that much less lint to deal with. Now, if you think that's a lot of lint, let's just look at the lint that's still in here. That's all off of that jelly roll. So get yourself a brush and clean off the top of your jelly roll before you start. Now this is the most fun part of working with jelly rolls, and that's opening them up to see what's all inside. But again, I like to get all the lint off before I open them. So now that I have that off, you can see all the different fabrics that we have, and they're all coordinated. For those who don't understand about jelly rolls, these are all strips that are cut from the same designer series, so they're guaranteed to always blend together, and you have the whole line without having to ask the sales clerk to cut you little tiny pieces of each one. So that's what we have. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to divide this jelly roll up in dark, mediums, and lights, and then I'll be back. So now I have my fabrics all arranged from darks down to mediums, and then going into the lights. And the reason I do that is I like to get a nice mixture in my blocks. The next thing we need to do is to test how wide these strips are.
Now, although pre-cuts are easy because it eliminates a lot of cutting, it is more difficult to get an accurate 1/4 of an inch. So you have to measure to find out where the 1/4 of an inch falls on your strip. This particular brand goes from high point to high point on both ends, and if you measure in between those high points of the zigzag cuts, it measures exactly 2.5 inches. So that's what I'll keep in mind when I'm stitching mine. Now every brand varies slightly, so measure before you start. Now I'm going to arrange my strips into darks, mediums, medium lights, and lights, and those will be my sets.
After sorting all the strips, then you want to press them, and then it's time to cut them. And I find these need to be cut into 8.5 inch strips. You could sew the entire length of the strips together and then cut them, but I find I'm much more accurate when I'm working with shorter lengths. So I have an 8.5 inch square up, and I'm going to now just trim my blocks up, or my strip up, to 8.5 inches, and I can do that by keeping it folded in half. And then the last strip we're going to cut by opening it up. And you'll see that out of each length, we're getting 5 cuts. With a little bit left over. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those up, and I'm going to stack them in the order in which I'm going to sew them. And I'll be back when it comes time for stitching.
While we're at the cutting table, we're going to go ahead and cut out 105 sashing strips and 63 cornerstones. After you have stitched the 4 strips together in each of your sets, you want to make sure to take the time to use your square up and make sure that your pieces are indeed 8.5 inches square. Now, if you're like me and you don't have a design wall, that's not a problem. What we don't want to do is have the same block right next to each other. To avoid that, we'll take the stack of blocks that are the same and we'll place them on the table in different piles. Then we'll take the next series of blocks that are the same and we'll shuffle those so that we put one of those in each of the piles. Then we'll take the next series and we'll shuffle those out so we have one of those in each of the piles. So you can see this is our way of sorting through to make sure that we're not getting the same block next to each other. Once you have that all shuffled up, just stack them on top of each other and grab the first block and then the next block and the next block. Guaranteed you won't have anything matching the one before it. You're going to arrange your blocks in rows of 6, and if you'll notice, they're alternating between going up and down and side to side in these strip sets. You're going to stitch a sashing strip to the left-hand side of each of your blocks, and when you get to the 6th strip, you're going to put another sashing strip on the right-hand side as well. You'll want to also follow the directions in your workbook as far as placing the sashing strips on the tops of each block and how the cornerstones are attached as well. Now this is the 6th strip where you can see the cornerstones are on both sides and there's a sashing strip on both sides. Your workbook will also give you complete directions as to which direction the seam should be pressed to ensure that all your points that need to be matched nest well together. This photo shows the first row completely stitched together. It includes the vertical sashing, the horizontal sashing, and the cornerstones. You'll notice that all the squares alternate between up and down and side to side orientation with the strips, and each row will be done exactly the same way following these same steps. As you complete each row, you'll attach it to the previous row. You will keep adding rows until you get 6 rows put together. At this time, we're going to add 1 row of sashing and cornerstones to the 6th row. Well, that's it for this session. I'll be back to show you how to complete this quilt. In the meantime, for those of you who do not belong, check out our Facebook group where you get the complete workbook for every project on YouTube that I teach. We'd love to have you join us. And make sure to subscribe. That way you won't miss one thing.